we'll go ahead and get started. I'm going to start by introducing myself. I see many familiar faces. Come on in, Mr. Seaton. What did he say?
Not this one.
Oh, okay. let me just say hello to them. I'm sorry. I worked with their family back in the day. I want to say hello. I thought about it after death.
You'll never lose it. Except for here where everyone has it.
Yes. So ignore it.
I may take it out. Are you in here?
All right, guys, we got a couple more families coming on in. So if we could make room, we've got plenty of room in the front. Those of you that it's physically easier to move up to the front, if you don't mind doing that, so that anybody who has accessibility issues, they kind of have some space in the back. I appreciate that. All right, now we're nice and cozy. We're ready to go. So my name is Monica Verra-Tirado, and I have the pleasure of serving as the Bureau Chief of the Bureau of Exceptional Education and Student Services with the Florida Department of Education. I have two department employees with us today. I'd like them to introduce themselves.
Hi everyone, I'm Amy Kowalczyk. I'm the Parent Services Program Specialist for the Bureau. I know a few of you see some familiar faces.
Hi, I'm Jessica Shane. I'm the Program Director for our Resource and Information Center at the Bureau.
And the other thing before we get started is I'd like to tell you a little bit about myself and then talk a little bit about what the Bureau does, and then we're going to get into some high-level kinds of work that we're doing, the outcomes that we're measuring, a little bit about thinking about moving forward, where we need to go next. And then we are passing out question cards, and if we have time, we try to get to some of those questions that are kind of broad, that would apply to the entire audience, and those that are very specific, because I know some of you have come in, you want to put a name to a face, you've got a very specific concern about your family. So what we like to do is get those cards, make sure we've got your contact information, and Jessica, Amy, and I, we work then when we get back to the ranch in Tallahassee to follow up and have very, personal conversations. At a conference with 10,000 families, and everybody's moving from place to place, having the kind of conversation around your specific needs is what I've learned over the years is putting the name to the face is good, but then actually spending much more time in understanding the complexity of the situation you're facing makes the most sense, and we're better able to help with it. So a little bit about me. I am from Florida. I graduated from high school in a local Florida school, and I've served in Pasco County Schools prior to coming to the Bureau for almost 19 years, where I started as a basic education teacher, never thinking I would be getting involved in special education. And my very first assignment, I had the opportunity to work in a school that was piloting inclusion for kids with severe emotional behavioral disabilities. At the time, it was SED. That's how long ago I've been. That's how long I've been in the system. It was EHSED. Some of you know what I'm talking about. And I really fell in love with special education. I fell in love with thinking creatively about how to support the students with really complicated needs. And I fell in love with inclusion. And so from there, one of those things, kind of like most of you, wasn't something when you were a little kid. Maybe some of you may have had this dream since you were a little kid to work in special education or be, but for many of us, we just kind of found ourselves on the journey, right? And then I, as a mom, I then had my first two children, and my son, I remember when he started kindergarten, he did his little assessment, and the reading specialist said to me, well, he's really young. And I didn't understand what that meant because he had a January birthday. And I said, well, he's not young. He's actually like he'll be almost turning 6. And she's just, well, he doesn't really. And she started going through like his little strainer and all the things he didn't seem to know. And here I am, a teacher, and thinking, he's really prepared for kindergarten and all these other things. And that began our journey of identifying, not in kindergarten, but, I think it was 3rd grade, that he indeed had pretty significant dyslexia, identified as a student with a learning disability, and then also the anxiety and all those other things that go on associated with that. And then my other son, his brother, was also diagnosed as well. And so I had the opportunity to kind of wear both hats throughout the system and understand what it feels like, even when, in fact, as I moved through my journey, I ultimately became director of special education in that same school system while my kids were actually in school there. And I remember feeling just as intimidated going to IEP meetings as most parents report, because it's my kid. I'm not the director of the program right now. I'm just a mom who's really worried about my child being successful. And so I say that because I think it's important to first of all kind of know to me, I always am curious when I meet people who are leaders, like what's their background? Have they walked in any of our roles? And then also to make those connections, to understand that completely drives me. How many times in my bureau do I say, if we struggle as parents getting information and we're in charge of it and we know it, we've had this chat, then what about the families that are not educators, or what about the mom or dad who's working 2 or 3 jobs and just so that drives us to try to improve. I'm not here to say that we are where we want to be at. I'm sure that there are lots of folks here who have lots of concerns. There may be some great things, but there may absolutely be some concerns. Then a little bit about our bureau. Our bureau serves all of exceptional student education. We partner very closely with Early Steps. You met our Early Steps counterparts yesterday in the Governor's Summit. I report directly to Chancellor Oliva. I hope that you caught, how many of you were in last night's session? Yeah, great. I hope that you caught the Chancellor for K-12 Public Schools started as an ESE teacher. How cool was that? When he recognized, I'm still getting goosebumps, that he recognized one of his preschool students in the audience who had just graduated from high school. And that really, to me, speaks to the commitment of the department to ensure that people that are in key places really understand when we say all means all, what is that? That they have expertise in both special education, general education, etc. And under the bureau, so we have all of special education. We also oversee student services, so school psychologists, school counseling, otherwise known as school guidance counseling, school nurses, school social workers, and all of the mental health work that is required now under the statute that was passed last year and was strengthened this year falls under our bureau. We also are responsible for the education of students in juvenile justice. So we work very closely with the DJJ agency. They're responsible for the safety and care and those kinds of things, and we're responsible to help districts ensure that our students in our DJJ or correctional types of situations, including prison systems, are getting the services that they need. So we've got a very broad umbrella that falls under our bureau, but I feel blessed to be able to serve because I feel like as you're listening to the different things that fall under there, I feel we can be the voice for those who sometimes don't have a voice, who have been historically perhaps underserved, underrepresented in our systems, and I appreciate what you guys are doing also to continue to move so many of these agendas and initiatives forward. So I want to take a second and talk about that just for a second because, I've been in this position for 7 years and I truly have seen the power of parents advocating and working as partners with the legislature. I loved Director Palmer saying, go and talk to your locally elected officials. Make sure they hear your stories. Those stories are powerful. That makes, such a difference. It's one thing for me to say it, but I'm a bureaucrat, I'm the department, I'm part of the, executive, not executive, what is it? 3 forms of government. You get legislative, I'm executive. Like I have to, after it's passed. So this, right. I didn't get the Starbucks coffee that some of you I see got this morning. I'm trying to function on just a little bit of hotel coffee, which says it's Starbucks, but it doesn't really, I'm not getting the same effects I normally get. But anyhow, and so this is what really important, this to me is very, very important because, and particularly as we just finished Memorial Day and we're, so grateful for all those people who serve for our wonderful freedoms that we have. But yet, I've learned a lot in being in Tallahassee that we are not engaged enough in the process. Meaning, so a lot of times what happens is, so a bill is passed, it's signed, and then So for example, let's say it's mental health, then I'm the person who will have the memo that will go out to the school districts. At that moment is when people start to say, well, what is this? Why did this happen? This doesn't, and then it's an opportunity for me to remind folks, this began, think about the Schoolhouse Rock video. Remember that? I'm just a bill? Yeah. Still true today. This thing that now I'm sending, we must do, started 12 months ago, even probably if it was a bill that was brought up multiple years, it could be 10 years in the making. And so the time is really for families, advocates, community folks to be talking with your locally elected officials, make sure they know your concerns, what's working that's in the statute, what's not working. When it comes to the rule making, so the State Board of Education has, sometimes the statute will say the state board can make rules. Now that is something that folks could give input at the department level, because then we could take that to our state board and make changes to the rules. But the statute, comes from the legislature. So this year we're having an early session, which means it starts in January, which means the committees will start coming back in September. They already have the calendar out as to when the committees are coming back, which means the first bill will probably be filed in August. And so you got about 6 weeks, to really, now is the time to really start to engage with your locally elected officials, make sure they understand what's working, because you don't want to throw out, things that you might have, that you might feel like this is working, but it needs to get improved, and then where are the gaps in the system. And so I feel it's really important that it's kind of a public service announcement, because I know they want to hear from you, and that's going to help them to make think about better policy, promote better bills, think about the language in the bill, ensuring that there are no unintended consequences for our population that we support, as well as are we addressing those needs, both in policy and the fiscal piece in order to support those policies. So, Florida continues to be charging ahead on ensuring that we are having a good workforce, prepared our students are prepared to enter the workforce. Our governor has talked about several things, including incentivizing businesses to come to Florida and ensuring that they want to come here because we've got a great workforce, and that would include every single Floridian, every student in our school system graduating college, career, and life ready. And Chancellor Oliva talked a little bit about a recent executive order that the governor put out that said the workforce by 2030, wanting to be the top workforce by 2030. And that seems so far away, except the students in 2030 are this year's first graders who are starting second grade next year. That's the workforce for 2030. So in fact, it's everything that we do now counts in terms of ensuring that they are prepared to have good opportunities for meaningful work that's aligned to their choice, that's aligned to their skills, and that we are, my vision is by 2030, we see employment for students with disabilities, the most complex needs at the highest level, and with the most meaningful type of work than we've ever seen before, things that we would never even have imagined. And so, in order to do that, you guys have heard me talk about this if you've heard me before, our system has to be aligned from preschool to post-school, that everything we do is geared towards our students being independent and ready to leave our school system college, career, and life ready. I go back to the emphasis of IDEA because that really sets the foundation, right, for every state. Without IDEA, states would not be required to educate students with disabilities. And I like to remind people that because prior to 1975, and some of us were born before 1975 and were in school in 1975, but prior to that, students with disabilities were not required to be educated. States had the choice of educating them or not. And so this is really, really important that the federal government said, no, it's a national policy. This isn't, and it's not just a feel-good policy, like, oh, we want, everybody come one, come all. No, this is saying we can't be a top nation unless we ensure that every one of our citizens, including those with disabilities, are prepared for equality of opportunity, be able to fully participate, to live as independently as possible, and to be as economically self-sufficient as possible. So it's more than just an education bill. It's really about preparation for life and for meaningful life, right? And I think that's the most important thing that I'm trying to make sure we're thinking about is our system aligned for meaningful post-school? Because those of you who now have children who are older, getting ready to transition out of the system, or they already have, you know, there's a saying that says when you're raising children, the days are long, but the years are short. Right? The days are long. Ooh, they're long. But then all of a sudden it's like, wow. It's, you know, now they're 22, now they're 23, right? And so we have to be having that vision of what our students, our children are going to need to be independent. So, one of the things aligned with this is the feds required each state to identify state systemic improvement plans. About they put this out about 6 years ago, but our plan started about 5 years ago. And the idea was that you're thinking about what is it that the students in your state need that, and the plan needed to be something that was aligned with other initiatives, the most important priorities in your state. And so for Florida, this was the premise for our state systemic improvement plan. The research points to the importance of a high school diploma for students, so you have opportunities after high school, any type of opportunities. And at the time, we were in the bottom third for graduating students with disabilities in the nation. And we had been in that level for some time. So there was absolutely a need to increase the graduation rate for students with disabilities and ensure that all students are college, career, and life ready. And remember, when we talk about college, we have more opportunities than ever for students with mild disabilities, students with more significant cognitive disabilities, even to participate in meaningful programs at the college and university level. Things that I don't think we would have ever even imagined that are happening in Florida, that people are looking to across the nation. So our goal was a couple things: to improve graduation rate, decrease dropout, but, and this is where we're going to continue to push forward, improving post-school outcome results. Going back to some of those pieces like the IDEA said, are we preparing students not just to graduate, but for meaningful post-school outcomes, including work, but including community involvement. So that would be independent, being independent as possible, you know. What type of living, how are we preparing them, how are we partnering for that with other agencies and other supports and families to ensure that as our students exit the system, they have the support that they need for meaningful options, because it doesn't happen by magic. And I think that's the thing that most, and in fact we were just talking about that, is that parents, you know, when you're in the system, again, those long days, long days, and then all of a sudden you're ready to transition out, and then it's like, okay, where's my ESC case manager? Where's this and you're really kind of on your own to figure out how to pull all the different agencies together. And a goal is that we create ways at the agency level. You heard the different heads speak yesterday, to create ways that it's not as difficult to navigate that. But that adult experience once you exit the K-12 system is often a challenge. And parent after parent calls me and says, okay, I'm just realizing now, we're not really quite exactly sure. We know we have a transition plan and all those things, but what does it exactly mean? And so this is where we really need to double down and focus our efforts. Also with that goal, for me, it's really important, no matter what your zip code, no matter where you live, no matter what type of program you're in, if you're in a public school, a charter school, you've got a blended program, maybe you're doing some home ed, and then you want to do some other things with your Gardner Scholarship, that we are helping to make sure that you know those resources and supports that are available to you. So here was our goal. In 12-13, our baseline data was 52.3%. So just a little bit over half of our kids with disabilities were graduating with a standard diploma, meaning the same diploma that anybody else graduates with. And we wanted to close the graduation gap, so closing that gap between students with disabilities and students without disabilities, and closing it by half. So you can see our goal would have been less than 11.6 and going up at least 10% to 62.3% for graduation. 17-18 was last year's cohort of graduates. This is our 18-19, and so that was really fun. It was exciting to see some of the kiddos who are recent 19 graduates. It's a great feeling when you've graduated from high school. So we don't yet have that 18-19 school year data, but what the districts are reporting is at least high or even more increases from last year. So we're required through the process to develop what they call a theory of action. In other words, what's your framework that you're going to use as you're working with schools and districts? And we used a couple of key points that in order to support districts and schools, we've got to improve our capacity as the state educational agency. That's what the SEA means. And the LEA, or the local educational agencies, which in Florida would be our school districts. So we have to improve our support for LEAs through using the result-driven accountability and a multi-tiered approach, help support districts to improve their capacity to improve. And if we do that, that will lead to increased graduation rate, narrowing that graduation gap and decreasing dropouts. That's another important piece. Our dropout rate was really high when we compared to the rest of the nation. We followed an evidence-based framework from the National Center of Educational Outcomes called Moving What Matters Most. 6 key practices. The 6 key practices are using data well, having very focused goals, having selecting and sharing evidence-based instructional practice. This is the key part though, implementing deeply, and monitoring and providing feedback and support. And I think where we have issues and concerns, I think, for example, many of you might say, let's even think about an IEP. You could use this to improve a system, a school, a district, a company. A CEO could use this for a private company, but you could think about this for an IEP, right? We've got great data, we've got goals, we've identified the practices. It's not being implemented deeply, right? Those are the calls that I get. Nobody's monitoring, right? So it's about, you can't just stop here, no matter what we're talking about. You're not gonna get the results that you want unless you're also getting in here. And this is where the leadership piece is very, very important, because naturally, those are hard for humans to do. And you think, well, why would that be hard? Well, and I give this example because to me it makes the most sense, is if you think about healthcare, we all understand how important it is to take care of ourselves healthy. We know that. And I could probably say right now, let's just say we turn this into a healthcare, and I mean preventative healthcare, okay? We want to be more healthy, right? Do you all feel you have access to data that would help you just know whether you're on the right track on your health goals? We have a lot of data. Okay. Do we have information that we could have some, could each of us right now, if I said, we're going to take half an hour and each of us think about what data would we use to become healthier ourselves, personally healthier? Everybody come up with a goal. Do you have enough information right now to come up with your own personal goal for health? Yeah, okay, so it's not the data, it's not that we don't know how to develop a good goal. Are there instructional or practices out there that we know? I'm gonna ask, if we were to put charts up right now, do you think we could probably fill the room with the things that we would know that are just known to help us to be more healthy? Maybe we could probably walk. Oh, walk more, right? Get more steps in, drink water, eat more fruits and veggies. We could go on and on and on. Sleep 8 hours a night, right? So that's not the problem. Implement deeply. What we know in the United States, and probably other countries as well, is we struggle even when it's in our own best interest to improve our health. Even when a doctor has said, if you don't do this, you are setting yourself up to have a shortened life expectancy or to have chronic issues. But you could control this, you could do some things about it. But even with all of that, we struggle to implement deeply. Why? Why do we struggle to implement deeply? Because human nature means when I have to change my behavior, it's hard for me to change my behavior. Because what do they say? Anything you need to do, if you need a new habit, do it at least 30 days or longer, right? So what this research shows, if I wanted to improve my health and I need to implement deeply, I'm more likely to be successful if there is a system of accountability. And I'm monitoring and providing feedback and support. So maybe I join Weight Watchers, or I work with a personal trainer, or I join a walking group with some friends. I get a Fitbit, and there's you guys following me, right? So without this system, any good thing that we know is good for us, either personally or as a system in society, is not likely to happen unless we put things in place that will help us to change our work into a new way of work, to ensure that it happens so fluidly that it's just the way things are. It's not like, oh, I got to remember to do this thing. I've got to remember Johnny's IEP, this new thing. No, it becomes a way of work. It becomes the new approach. And if we continue to be in a cycle of inquiry and learning, that's going to lead to high levels of success. Meaning, all of the people who are part of the planning, and now I'm going to switch back, although it's the same thing, we were talking about personal goals, but thinking about how do we continue to improve the system? How do we get to where we want to be? Because the future that we want to get to doesn't exist yet, which means we have to imagine it, right? There were things happening today that people 30, 40 years ago, remember in 1975, that's not that long ago, kids weren't even required to go to school. States weren't required to educate them. We've come so much further that there are things back then that people probably couldn't even imagine. Well, we'll get them into school, but that's about it. You know? So the next step is something that we've got to work together, and we're not going to be able to vision that unless we work together to inquire and learn. So this just gives you some more information on that. We work with districts in tiered support. Districts that need the most support are typically districts that use the data to drive that, and those are districts that we prioritize in terms of our on-site visits. But we have a system for monitoring and providing support both for outcomes, so things like graduation and dropout and all those other things, as well as compliance. Are your IEPs written in compliance with the law? Are you getting your evaluations completed in the timely manner, etc.? So I wanted to talk a little bit about the on-site monitoring that's been happening, kind of bring you guys up to speed. So from 13-14 to 18-19, we've had 79 on-sites, including 22 districts that have multiple visits. One of the things that's important is, again, thinking about what it takes to make systems change is ongoing support. And so those multiple visits mean, let's see, we're going to continue to monitor that progress and see how we can partner with you. Our visits include Department of Corrections, so those would be our prisons, county jails. We have students, if they've been they're being served in county jail, we have to make sure that they're getting the services they need. There's also, I'm not sure the status of them today, but at least 2 or more skilled nursing facilities that have students with very medically fragile needs, and they revisit those to see what's going on with that. We've had multiple staff, including project staff, and let me talk a little bit about what we mean by project staff. So many of the sessions that you visited or projects that you've worked with, you may not realize fall under my bureau as well as the Department of Ed. So if you've ever worked with fiddlers, that falls under my bureau. If you've ever worked with the Florida Inclusion Network, if you've worked with CARD, if you've worked with positive behavior support, if you've worked with Project Access, if you've worked with, well, Family Cafe is actually one of the projects that we support through the department, if you look on the insert of the program. And so, and I could go on and on and on. These are federally funded programs designed to support both students and families. And so it's very important that they be part of that process because they're really the boots on the ground. Those are the people that you are most likely to be interfacing with in the community. Not as much as the department staff, because we really have a very small team considering the size of our state. We also bring peer monitors along on our visits. And those would be directors and other folks from other districts so that we can learn from each other. As our parent, who is the volunteer of the year, who got the Chef's Award last night, said we can all learn from each other. And so we make sure that we include peers on our visits. So one of the most powerful components of our on-site visits are focus groups. I'm going to move to this slide. And so these are the groups that we include in our visits. Parents of students who are 14 years and older, because we're really trying to get better and focus on the transition piece. How do we ensure that parents have that information? We interview students at middle and high school, we interview teachers, and we interview administrators. Here are some of the questions that we ask. This is like a teacher focus group. What are some of the supports that you are using or aware of around concepts like universal design for learning? Basically, universal design for learning is an approach that is geared to eliminate barriers to instruction and assessment, and provide the infrastructure. And the idea is when you design classroom learning that way, not only does it benefit students with disabilities who require that level, but every other child in your classroom is going to benefit, because in essence, you've created more of a personal approach to education. What kind of interventions are in place to help make sure kids are graduating? So we want to hear from the teachers. What do you understand about these things? You're the one who actually has the biggest impact on student learning. You spend the most time with the students. What's going on with that? I want to add, it's not on the slide, but we also interview groups of paraprofessionals, particularly schools that have a lot of paraprofessionals. We want to make sure they also are provided the training and support they need to support our students, because quite frankly, in many situations, paraprofessionals spend more direct time with our students than teachers do, because there's way more paraprofessionals than there are teachers. How do you monitor kids? How do you make sure kids who are at risk of dropping out? Do we use mentoring programs? How do you communicate with a student who may be at risk of dropping out? How are you engaging the family in that conversation? What resources are you providing a parent to assist their child? These are questions for the school leaders, so the principal, the assistant principal, etc. We ask them, what is your service delivery model? How do you provide a continuum of services, including support for kids in general ed? If you need special, separate classes, what does that look like? And then what supports are in place for students who may be in a self-contained classroom? And making sure that they have opportunities if they need to be even part-time in a special self-contained classroom. How are you ensuring that they're fully engaged in the rest of what's happening in the school community so that it's not an afterthought? We're getting better as a state. I hear less concerns, but I still, at least one call a year comes where some very cool field trip that the whole school or the whole 5th grade was going on, it didn't make it to the kids in the self-contained class for students with autism, or and that's not okay. That is not okay. And so it's like, what is your plan to ensure this doesn't get overlooked? It's not a separate, it's all is all. These are all your classes, these are all your students. When we are working with the high school students, again, we're talking high school and leaders, we're talking a lot about the dropout thing again, because our dropout rates were so high, close to, in some districts, 1 out of 3 students were leaving school as a dropout, as opposed to graduating. And then we go to the students, and these are the most powerful focus groups. The kids are just amazing. They are amazing. So we asked them, is anybody talking to you about your plans after high school? Well, and then of course one thing, so we're talking here as parents, but of course my chat with them, and they know this too, is because this is your plan now. You're gonna still need support, and we're not suggesting the minute you turn 18, you're ready to go all on your own. We know that that's not true. Those of us with grown adult children, we know that that circle of support continues on. But shifting the ownership and really the leading of it, so that it's not my plan anymore, it's not my dreams, and it better not be. I gotta back off, because I can't superimpose my dreams. So it's like, do our kids, have they been empowered to begin to think about, what do I want to do, and how do I advocate for myself? Oh. Uh-oh, am I empowering her too? But it's true, right? And that's hard for us as parents, but it has to be there. It has to be their plan. Do your teachers communicate to you about what courses you need to graduate? Have they told you what you may have to make up, like if you're missing courses and those kinds of things? Making sure they're attending their IEP. I asked them, are your ideas being listened to? Do your teachers listen to your ideas? Do your parents listen to your ideas? Right? And in most cases they say yeah, but most kids do say, I think I need to be a little bit stronger about, I'm ready to be a little bit more empowered and find my voice. Does that make sense? Does that sound about, yeah. Are there obstacles? And this is a really important question. We say, is there anybody that you could name right now inside the school today or outside of the school that you can go to if you have any concern, whether it's academic, social, emotional, I had something happen at home and I'm really upset. Is there an adult a trusting adult? Because the research is clear that all it takes is at least one adult in the lives, particularly of an adolescent, that believes in a student, and that the student feels that they can go to, that can make a difference in terms of whether a student is successful in school or not. It is best when the student says, I have adults at home, my parents are my biggest cheerleaders, I've got people in the school who are my cheerleaders, and I've got a really good team. And I've actually heard kids describe that. I've got a great team, and everybody's on the same page. But for some students, we know we have many students who may be in a homeless type situation. They're living with family that may not be. They're kind of like with a cousin and those kinds of things, and they may not report that they have that adult outside that really understands and advocating for them. And so it's even more important that they have someone within the school, and that goes back to our mentorship. A mentor, someone who believes in you, someone who can help navigate these things, particularly if you're in a situation where even with caring adults, even with caring parents, if you're a first generation citizen, or you're a first generation high school graduate, or thinking about college, oftentimes families don't really know what do we do next. We need some help. We ask the kids about inclusion, and over again, what the students tell us about being educated in the general education environment is that, and many of these students had previously been in self-contained classes that we interviewed, said being in general education was one of the best things that has happened to me. They described the work being harder, but they said our teachers expect more from us. And they also say, I realize that I'm not the only student. I used to think, and this is the kids, I'm quoting the kids, I used to think, gosh, I was just kind of a dummy. But I realize now that I'm in classes with kids without disabilities, I'm actually wondering, why don't some of them have IEPs? Why? These are what the kids tell us. They're like, I'm not the only kid who didn't get that lesson or didn't understand that. So I think it also helps them to see their struggles are not just their struggles. At like Algebra 1, just about everybody's struggling with Algebra 1. It's not just because I have an IEP that Algebra 1 was hard for me. So it kind of makes them, a lot is more empowered, and they've said quotes, and this is not meant to be negative to our ESE teachers that I really respect, but quotes like, my ESE teachers love me, but my general education teachers know how to teach me. Because the general education teachers know the content standards and the rigor that is needed, and they really felt challenged by that. We asked them, again, remember, these are now high school students, right? Some middle school and some high school students. Questions like, if your gen ed teacher is not providing your accommodations, what do you do? And what I'm hoping to hear is the kid knows what to do, right? So I go to the teacher and I bring that up. And then in some cases they'll say, yeah, the teacher, did it. And then the other case will say the teacher didn't do it. I said, then what happens next? And what's interesting is more and more students are saying, they say, I try to do this first before I involve my parents. I don't know if you guys know that that's what they're doing, but that's what they're doing. Which is good, right? Yeah. And so then they'll say, I'll go to my ESE case manager, my ESE teacher, and then they'll work with that. And then one kid says, I'll just go to the principal's office. I'm like, and just bring my IEP. And so the other cool thing is I'm hearing more and more kids say, I keep my IEP in my backpack so I can pull it out whenever I need to. And so I know, but yes! How cool, right? Exactly. Pull it out, here it is, You don't agree with that? Well, let's meet with the principal after school. But I'm really proud of them. But the good news is they say this is what the kids say, they say most of the gen ed teachers really do provide their accommodations, and what they've really said is they said, we just think they need more training. And they'll say, they have a lot of students, I'm like, yeah, I know. And they say, we just think they need more training so that, they understand that we're not just asking like to try to get out of something, or that's a lot of times what they'll say is some teachers we don't think they understand that our tools allow us, our IEP tools, our accommodations allow us to show our best work. It's not so that we can get an advantage or get out of doing something. So this has been, this is the parent one, but this student one has been the most powerful. And then the parents, the same thing. Parents, overall, from the first year we started doing this 5 years ago till now, more and more parents are saying, my kids are getting more, and like my question is, are you getting what you need in all your classes, most of your classes, some of your classes, or none of your classes? The conversation is moving more to some or most, hardly any say all, but it's more of the most, but we got to get to the all, right? And then the transition planning, this is one that is, I'm hearing better things, but we're still not where we are. Still a lot of fear and anxiety as kids are getting ready to transition out of the system. So the fear and anxiety that parents have from day to day in those long days, short years, gets really amplified as you're thinking about what exactly does happen after graduation? Where does my child go? Particularly those students who have the most complex needs that will need more support than other students. So work experiences is a big one. And that's because we know that early exploration of my strengths and my abilities as a student is going to help me to think about what I may want to do for my vocation as I move into the future. And I think it's really important, remember, because when we talk about college or work or career, college is supposed to be something that you do so that you end up with an occupation. But it means that you're going to college because the job I want requires me to have college, right? So it's not like you either go to work or you go to college. Like college is like some end. College is not an end. College is what you do to get to the job that you hopefully want that requires a college degree. But in order to do that, all of us need work experiences. So let's say for me, becoming a teacher, I actually was learned about thinking about becoming a teacher when I was in high school. And my Spanish teacher had us do little lessons with the elementary school down the road. And that was like a work experience for me, right? And I remember the teacher said to me, the elementary teacher, she said, you should think about becoming a teacher. You're really quite a natural. I had never thought about becoming a teacher, never. So those work experiences, I mean, here I am, I'm almost to 26 years in education, and it was the best decision I've ever made. So those work experiences early on help us to think about, maybe I didn't think about that. Am I natural with this? And so we want to make sure our kids have those opportunities. So see, these are some of the positive outcomes for OnSite. We have had more engagement from executive leadership, and when I say that, superintendents are at the table. And in fact, I've been invited personally to meet with the School Superintendents Association multiple times this last year, and I'm going to be on their agenda when they meet again in October, which, that's a game changer, ladies and gentlemen. That is a game changer. When we get buy-in from school superintendents, from school boards, about all really means all, that is when you really begin to see the system shift. And outcomes for students are becoming part of the district-wide initiative, and not just, what's that?
I have a question.
Yes.
All of those surveys that you did you break those down by district?
They're in the results. Summaries of the results are on our website.
Okay.
You can go on and you can see our written reports for different districts that we visited.
Okay, so you send those surveys out to all districts?
They're not surveys. These are when I physically meet.
No, not this, but all those questions that you just went over.
Yeah, no, those are actually in the
On-site
meeting.
visits.
Yes.
Okay.
So I'm meeting with a group of 10 students.
Okay.
And then we take our notes and then we summarize the themes. And then those themes, let's say you wanted to, where's someplace we just went this year, Alachua County. So you could go to Alachua County, you could go on our on-site monitoring reports, you could see Alachua County, and you'll see the different themes that emerged.
Okay.
Continuing on, better data so that we can drive our work, more transparency, increased collaboration with all the discretionary projects I mentioned, like CARD and BIN and all the different folks out there. And then the increased implementation of a multi-tiered approach. These are some additional positive outcomes. So all of this then is going to circle back to where are we with our state strategic plan, right? Because that's what I said, 5 years ago we had to set some pretty strong goals to move our state forward. So, and remember, we're thinking about increasing graduation, decreasing dropout, but not stopping with that. It's not enough to get across the stage. It's did we actually prepare you for a meaningful, good life afterwards? So this next piece is talking a little bit about the impact of inclusive education and what we're seeing with that. We talked about IDEA. We know that, let me go back to this. IDEA also talks about inclusion and relates to that we only remove students from their non-disabled peers when the extent of their disability is so severe that even with appropriate supports, they're not going to make progress. So we have to be very careful when we make those decisions as IEP teams. Now, this is really, really important. Please, 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 let's pay attention to this because this passed in statute several years ago. And this is that Florida adopted a definition of inclusion. So it's in statute, and I share this because it's like, if you don't know this, know it, because it's in statute. The inclusion in Florida means students are receiving education in a general class setting reflecting natural proportions and age-appropriate heterogeneous groups in core academic and elective or special areas within the school community. I love the word community. We're going to hear it again. A student with a disability is a valued member of the classroom and school community. Very important. All means all. We're all in this together. So teachers and administrators support universal education. There's that universal design for learning. So it's now in statute that we're thinking about universal education, ways to create what I would call, accessibility ramps to the curriculum and the standards for all students. And they have knowledge and support available to enable them to effectively teach all children. Now this is key, and if I were you, I'd go back and ask my district. And the teacher is provided access to technical assistance and best practices, instructional methods, and supports tailored to the student's needs based on current research. So going back to, inclusion is not just everybody goes into general education and good luck. We need to be sure that leaders have support, teachers have support, most importantly actually teachers, that teachers have the support that they need. And support is not just another body in the classroom. Support is that I know and understand the knowledge and skills in order to educate the students in my classroom who come with a lot of variety of needs. Let me go here, and here we got several questions.
When it comes to universal design and inclusion, is anybody looking at the negative impacts or unintended consequences of all the third-party apps being used by teachers? Has a negative effect on kids with executive functioning issue, screen readers. They could have 6 high school classes and 6 different ways of getting homework. And I don't know how that ties into universal design.
Oh, absolutely. That is a concern. Yeah, absolutely.
So start that conversation at the local level.
Yeah.
But I wonder what the
Yeah,
state is
send us get with one of our, some of you came in later, so Jessica and Amy are 2 specialists. Jessica's a director from the Bureau, and they're collecting comments and questions. So make sure we have your contact information. Now I'm seeing a lot of hands. I'm not gonna be, I'm gonna go to you, and then we're gonna, let me finish up, and then we'll do questions. Yes.
I just want to know, how is this, that's great, this is absolutely wonderful, but how is this being implemented? Everything that you're saying is fantastic and great, but how is it being implemented if it's not being done at our local level? When is the Florida Department of Education stepping in to take care of it within our local? Because we can send this all day long to our districts and we get ignored. Or we get some kind of bogus, professional, wonderful wording, and it's like, you need to answer my question. Just let's implement. How is it being implemented from the Florida Department of Education for our 67 districts?
Right. So I wish there was a simple answer to that, but
I have
We've
fun.
got to
I have fun.
Can we continue on?
All right,
We've got a lot of hands. This is my
All
fault,
right.
if you don't mind waiting. Okay.
I'll explain.
So but we'll go back to that. You've seen our regular class placement has gone up. So that means we're referring to inclusion. If you went back further than that, only about half of our students were included across the board. Now we're at 76%. This compares us to the 7 largest states. This is Florida, California, Illinois, New York, Ohio. This is the United States, is at 62.7. Pennsylvania and Texas. We're the 3rd largest state in the United States now. And then we had a huge historic moment. So we've been moving forward with increased inclusion while continuing to respect that there will be still some students who may need a separate environment. So every time I talk about inclusion, there's at least 1 or 2 families whose child may be in a separate school, and maybe a separate charter school for kids with autism, or a separate traditional public school, who say, oh my gosh, are you just trying to close those down? Absolutely not. But what we want to make sure is that participation in a separate class or school is done through informed consent, and you fully understand your choices and your rights, and that it's not that there isn't an opportunity for inclusion. So if you're one of those parents whose kids is at a separate ESC center school or a charter school that specializes in kids with disabilities, no one's trying to take those choices away, but we certainly want to make sure it's a choice. It really is a choice. So going back to thinking about graduation, in the summer of 2014, our legislature eliminated the special diploma. And there was a little bit of panic across the state. Everybody was really, really worried. Our graduation rate's gonna go down. We already have a bad graduation rate. It's gonna go down. Nobody's gonna stay in school. The kids are gonna drop out. School, our high schools are gonna, fall apart. So remember, so there was no more special diplomas. So beginning in fall of 14-15, every single ninth grader in Florida was working towards the same standard diploma, with a small number of those students working on what we would call our access point classes, but also working towards that same standard diploma. So let's see what happened. Let's take a look at our graduation rates. Remember, this is the first cohort that graduated. Way back when in 08-09, only 37.3% of our kids with disabilities were graduating within the 4-year cohort, as compared to 65.5% of all students. This represents students who may have taken more time than the 4 years, so it was at 49.8, still less than half were graduating with a standard diploma. For our 17-18, so last year's graduates, that first group of students look at that. We are nearly closing that achievement gap. And here's the beautiful thing, because the other thing when I've been talking about inclusion is people say you're going to destroy general education classes. And I say, well, the research doesn't suggest that. The research suggests and shows that inclusion creates better classrooms for all students. And when we support and train our teachers to think about the diversity of the students in the classroom, and we have all kinds of diverse needs in Florida, not just related to students with disabilities. We've got over 300 languages. Our students speak their home language are over 300 in Florida. So think about just what a wonderful diverse state that we have. So the more our teachers think about an inclusive classroom as just a way of work in our system, the better off we are. As inclusion went up, so did students with disabilities. And as the research has said for the last 30 years, what do we see here? 86.1% of our students, all students graduated. So it's had a positive impact on everyone. And here's our dropout. Our dropout rate went from 21.1% to 13%. Our dropout for students without disabilities also went down during that same time. Our graduation gap, remember I said we wanted to close that gap? We had a 23.3% graduation gap. We're down to 9.1%, so we got less than half. We reduced it to less than half. And this is a really cool thing. We also we are seeing the gap close for, now what this slide is students with disabilities, but looking at white students with disabilities, black students with disabilities, and all students with disabilities. And why did you just pick those two groups? Because the Department of Ed had some very specific targets, because our biggest gaps were between white students and black students, both with and without disabilities. If you look here, so here is white, black, and all, and you can see, this was 13-14, not too long ago. Only 45.5% of our black students with disabilities were graduating. As we move along, we see all three groups have increased, and what's happening to the gap here? It's closing, it's getting smaller. So the benefit is not only impacting students with disabilities, but students with disabilities by race and ethnicity. And here you can see the gap. Now this gap is students with disabilities, so there was a 13.2% graduation gap, and this is students without disabilities. So what's interesting is when you break it down like that, since 13-14, we've actually had a smaller gap for students with disabilities than kids without disabilities. Okay, meaning somehow we're doing something within our educational programs with kids with IEPs that has been reducing the gap. But look at how this gap has been plummeting compared to kids without disabilities. So there's still a gap, 16.7, it went to 8, and then here's our gap, 6.3. So the gap is going down for everybody. This is really important stuff, guys, because these are things, when I talk about imagining a future, particularly those of us who not only are advocates and care a great deal about students with disabilities, but are also the voice for people of color who've been historically underrepresented in our school systems. These are things people said couldn't be done because they basically have said certain groups of people are just smarter than other groups of people. The gap is a gap. That's the way it is. So this isn't just about students with disabilities when you talk about inequity and you talk about lower expectations. So we're seeing things happen that we weren't even necessarily thinking for sure that we would see the impact on all groups, including getting at those gaps by race and ethnicity. Again, that all-time high of 79.6, almost 80% of our students who left in 17-18 left with the same diploma as all other students. That's huge. This goes on to post-school outcomes. This is where we've got to really double down as we're moving forward, because these are kids who are found a year after graduation. There's a survey that happens. You can also find this on the DOE website in our data section, and you can look at it by district. But 58.8% of our kids are found either employed or in continuing ed. 50% are found in some kind of higher ed or competitively employed. And only 24% are found in higher education. Now what's interesting is when you look at this compared to students without disabilities, we are seeing more and more students, less students going into higher ed, which we defined as university, and more going into technical kinds of fields at this point, because there's a high demand actually. And in fact, many people who are graduating from college are needing to go back to get some technical certificates in order to actually get hired. And then this goes back to this. What this takes a look at is what are your outcomes from looking at, okay, this is 14-15, that's 15-16, and the last two are 16-17 school year. So if you graduated with a standard diploma, if you were a student with a disability who graduated with a standard diploma, this is employment. If you dropped out and you were a student with a disability, or if you graduated with a special diploma, who was less likely to work in 14-15 out of all those groups? Special diploma. Less likely to be in continuing education. Same thing as we move forward to those next groups. And it's interesting because a lot of times people would say, when I do interviews about dropouts, they'd say, well, the kids they're dropping out because they have to go to work. And then when I asked the kids, I said, well, I'm hearing about kids in your community who drop out because they're going to work. The kids say, oh, they're not working. They're playing video games. Where they're dealing drugs, they're not working. So there's this myth about kids who drop out, and particularly kids with disabilities, are working. They are not found working. They are not found to be working. So where do they need to be? In school, and then, exactly, not dropping out. And this is our gap. All students are employed or continuing education, 80.2, and then 58.8. We've got to close that gap for sure. We've got to close that gap for 16-17. So we've got a 21, you can see the gap. 28%, 28 points for higher ed, 24 for higher ed or competitively employed, 21 for any type of employment, any type of continuing ed. All right, I'm going to move this because I got the look that I have 0 time. So last thing is really quick. So you might say, because I hear people say, oh, they're just pushing the kids to graduate. No, the diploma means nothing. Well, this is our national data from the NAEP, which is the National Assessment of Educational Progress. And what this does is it tests kids all across the United States. And this, on the left, these are our Florida 4th graders. And it goes from 2003 to 2017. The bar on the bottom is Florida 4th graders with disabilities. The bar on the top is Florida's 4th graders without disabilities. The line in the middle is the gap, okay? This is the nation. National students with disabilities in 4th grade, national students without disabilities, the gap. You can see here we went from 184 at the time. The same thing, the nation was also at 184 for students with disabilities. Our students with disabilities during the same time we've been promoting inclusion went from 184 to 206. At the national level, it went up, it went down, and now it's down to 186. Our students without disabilities during that same time went from 223 to 232. The national trend went from 220 to 226. So our kids without disabilities outperform their national peers. Our kids with disabilities outperform their national peers. And look at what is happening to our gap. We were at 39, we're at 27. What happened to the national gap? It got bigger. Performance is going down, the national gap went up. You see the same, this is 4th grade. Same for 8th grade. Now that you understand how the graphs work, I think you can see it a little bit better. So here's last year, students with disabilities in Florida. The nation, they outperformed the nation. Students without disabilities were the same, so it certainly didn't hurt our kids. And we had gone up, so students without disabilities went up, and our gap is significantly smaller than the nation.
Is that those even on access?
It does not include students with access for the NAEP. Yeah.
When you are talking about
that's-
disabilities, you talk about mental disabilities, because I tried, her is it was at the University in Madrid of Art, and I tried here to, she has many prizes. And I tried here to put it in the university, but they say, yes, but you know, she has to pass the exam of math.
We have programs for students with significant cognitive disabilities in Florida.
And she couldn't.
No, we actually have specific programs that are designed for that in Florida. Yeah, so there's some sessions actually going on. Amy, maybe you could show and connect her. Yeah, we do. But let me finish up, and you can see the same trends for 4th grade math and for 8th grade math. Finally, we've added additional survey questions in our annual survey, which our latest data says we're around 30,000. Amy, can you? Okay. We added some questions about transition. And so we.
For the whole state, I'm sorry.
What?
You said 30,000 for the whole state.
Yeah, we've heard
of
from
people that.
have completed the survey.
Okay. for
Yeah.
the entire state.
Yeah, we used to have like 9,000 we hear from. We heard from over 30. What was our latest number?
10.7.
No, the number?
Oh, 41,000?
41,000, wow. Yeah, we went up to 41,000, so that's pretty significant. And so what we did see is in our transition items, we saw a correlation between districts whose parents reported strong transition support. Then we looked at their graduation rates for the districts and those kinds of things. And this is the difference. If parents reported favorably in their district on transition, districts had a higher graduation rate, a lower dropout rate, students were more likely to be proficient in reading, parents overall were more likely to report positively about parent involvement, and they also had more transition IEPs were more likely to be in compliance. I'm sorry, I know some of you are taking pictures of that. And then the very important is our partnership with the Voc Rehab. That's going to be the next wave that's going to really be a game changer.
Is it monitored by the state, the involvement of VR within the school districts?
Yeah, what VR does. The VR also reports to our commissioner.
So we can ask for that monitoring level of number of students that are going through transition that have a VR representative?
Yeah, I think we
Target
should,
it down?
yeah, we should be able to do that, yep. These are some of the numbers. It's still, the early participation has a ways to go in terms of they're doing activities age 14, but it's beginning, it's increasing, so we're on the up. Okay, with that I'm gonna end, and what I'll ask is, I can stick around for those people who have questions.
With all this statistics you've been giving us and everything like that, it's all just statistics. And what it boils all down to is the counties we live in and trying to get the disability and all the therapists and all this stuff for our children. But yet, when we try to get it, they blow us off at IEP meetings. And you're giving us all this for the state statistics. But yet, I found out as a state Department of Education, you cannot do a thing to enforce anything in counties. Why is that? You can't enforce anything. All you give us is statistics for the whole thing, but when we win state complaints and all this other stuff, all you tell us is that, well, we can't enforce it. We can only tell them what to do. And then they got 365 days to get that corrected, and if they don't, that's a year and a half away. You still can't do anything for the son. I mean, you can give us all these statistics. What about the real meat, enforcing it onto them?
So I think we have a dispute resolution session, I believe in. Is that going to be today or tomorrow? Today, this afternoon, where we do talk more in depth about local, like what authority has the department been given? What authority then do parents have beyond that? So in other words, There's a lot of things that we can do, there's some things that we don't have beyond that. In other words, at the end of the day, if the IEP team and the school, if the parent and the IEP team just cannot come to agreement, that is where it goes to, you take it to due process.
Due process, but all this due process, you still can't enforce anything.
Yeah, it's way beyond
to go to
just
due process.
IEP.
I do.
Anybody wanna go to due
Specific things
process?
that are happening.
I'm a free special.
What is the one?
Mrs. Montepano,
Can you give us another one?
are you soliciting?
Yeah, I am.
What's the conference for later? You said you're gonna go more in depth. Which session is
Amy
that?
can point that to you. It's where we have we talk about when you file a state complaint. It goes to what Mr. Seaton's referring to. The frustration in terms of, basically, when a parent calls and says, I want the state to come in, I really want the state like to come in today and make the school district change that. And to your point, that's not the way they're legally set up. So what we do is through a variety of ways of increasing early resolution, working with families, and again, hopefully empowering families through a lot of the projects that we have to have that voice at the local level. Be at that school board meeting,
But
you
how
know.
are we implementing more with the trainings for the paraprofessionals and for the teachers?
Right.
Because, it's in the statute that should be
Yes,
happening.
those
but
are
how
questions,
we-
right.
But when they respond back with that fancy lingo, like with the email that I had sent you, he responded to me 3 days later with some fancy lingo. It didn't solve the problem. The kids are still sitting against the concrete walls.
So then we continue to work. I mean, that's,
Can I answer?
I've been doing this as a mom myself.
I think that the issue
Yeah.
is that you're talking of, it starts at the education, at your level. The foundation it comes from the Department of Education. And you guys, it seems like you guys are focused on the graduation rates and all that, but you're not putting the attention on the local, and county school issues that are going on. You're focused on this issue. And me, like as a parent of a child that has that's medically fragile, it's like you're not even focusing on anything with that community. It's everything about kids that are able to be inclusive in classes and, work in the community. But like you showed the survey and you visited 2 nursing homes or something for medically fragile.
That at that time, there were only 2 that served those students.
Okay, and but that's still like from 2013 to, was it 13, 18? In 5 years, that's all that you could do.
So let me be
Do
clear.
that.
In an hour, I don't think you heard my introduction when I came in. We cover a lot of stuff under our bureau. So I just picked one thing to focus on. If you want to
And so
have
within the graduation, you were just focused on graduation.
today, yes.
Okay, so when I read the book, it doesn't say that. It says, it's about education, so that's why I came here, because I was hoping I would hear more about, we're gonna try to get, more therapists, more services in school. Like, that's what I'm thinking I'm gonna hear when I come here, not about the graduation. That's why I came, I stayed this whole time. Because I was waiting to hear stuff like that, because those are the issues in the schools, and that's why I took my child out of public school, because the services are horrible, and our children are not getting what they need.
Okay. So what I've suggested when people first came in was, obviously, each of your needs are very, very individual. Everybody in here could have potentially very, very different student needs. I would like what we do, and this tends to work well, is we get your information, we follow back up with you so that we can better understand what district, what school, how is it breaking down. I understand more about your concerns, and we're going to continue to work together. I have a better context.
Because it's
Right.
really against the wall what they're. I'm not going to get into that.
Right,
That's
but
more
I'm
personal.
right. But that's how we
it's like-
continue to make improvements.
But how does the administrative staff in the district not see that? When I'm copy pasting point blank, highlighting it for them with picture, visual
I
description, boom, and they're still not like just and that's what I'm not trying to anything like that. I'm just frustrated and going
It's
through
very
this.
frustrating, yeah.
But it's like how do they see that I care, and it's not just for my son or for my 2.5-year-old that's going to be going in October. It's for the rest of the community in my district that it's not just my son it's affecting. There's 12 other kids in his class. It's affecting those 12 other kids too. That's.
So we're going to continue to work
Yeah,
on your
I
issue.
know.
And we're going to conclude now, though. We're going to conclude, and we will stick around. I think is there another session supposed to be starting here?
Yes. But